Have you ever felt that speaking truth only made things worse? That the more you tried to explain, defend, or justify yourself, the more tangled everything became? In our noisy world, silence is often mistaken for weakness. But in the deepest traditions of Buddhism, silence is not escape, it is clarity. It is a sacred space where karma works without interference. The Buddha never said that every battle must be fought with words. In fact, he taught that wisdom lies in restraint, in knowing what to say, when to speak, and just as importantly, when to remain silent. Welcome to Stillness Unfolded, where we dive deep into timeless teachings and illuminate the subtle truths of human experience through the lens of Buddhist thought. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to take a breath, settle into this moment, and let's walk together into this reflection. By the end of this video, you'll not only learn about 7 specific moments when silence becomes your strength, you'll also see how these teachings can protect your peace, preserve your energy, and allow karma to restore balance without your interference. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice helps build this community of awareness and compassion. Now let us begin. Section 1. When lies are told about you. There's something uniquely piercing about being misunderstood, especially when falsehoods are spoken about your character. It's not just the words themselves that cut, but the distortion they cause. A single lie can twist the truth like a knife, poisoning perceptions, and turning hearts that once stood beside you into shadows that quietly drift away. And when that happens, what's the natural response? We want to speak, to defend, to run into the fire of accusation and shout, "That's not who I am." We want to correct the story before it hardens. We want the world to see the truth, now, not later. But the Buddha taught us that sometimes, truth is like a seed. It does not bloom under pressure. It needs space, silence, and the timing of nature. Here is the paradox. The more you struggle to correct a lie, the more entangled you become in its energy. Lies are like sticky cobwebs. The more you flail, the more caught you become. But stillness is different. Stillness is clarity. Stillness is power that does not flinch. There's a story often told in Zen circles about a respected monk in a small village. He was calm, generous, deeply admired. One day, a merchant's daughter accused him of fathering her unborn child. The villagers were outraged. His disciples were crushed. They urged him to deny it, to clear his name. But the monk, with no trace of agitation, simply replied, "Is that so?" He offered no defense. He raised the child when it was born, providing for it lovingly. A year later, the young woman confessed she had lied. The real father was someone else. The child was returned to her family, and the monk? He said again, "Is that so?" and returned to his practice, as if nothing had changed. His silence was not weakness. It was the supreme confidence that truth does not need performance. It needs patience. When lies are spoken about you, remember this. Those who need to believe them were never aligned with your soul in the first place. You lose nothing by walking in silence, but you lose everything when you allow a lie to hijack your peace. In Buddhist teaching, right speech does not only concern what we say, but also what we choose not to say. To engage in useless speech, harsh words, or defensive noise is to step off the path of wisdom. Some battles are traps in disguise, created not to bring resolution, but to ensnare your spirit in drama. Instead, ask yourself, if I speak now, will it bring light, or will it stir more dust? If it only serves the ego, stay silent. Silence is not passivity. It is a profound act of trust, in karma, in time, in the unshakable nature of the truth. Let the world spin its stories. Let the crowd murmur. Let the impatient demand answers. You don't need to be the louder voice. You need only be the clearer soul. Because karma doesn't operate on the clock of outrage. It works on the timeline of justice. Quiet, measured, exact. And when it arrives, no one will question the silence you kept. They will only admire the strength it took to keep it. Section 2. When you are betrayed. Betrayal is one of the deepest wounds we can experience. Not because it comes from strangers, but because it comes from those we once trusted. Friends, lovers, family, people who shared our joy, our vulnerability, and our truth. When they turn against us, it doesn't just hurt, it disorients. It shakes the foundation of our emotional world. And what do we instinctively want to do when we're betrayed? We want answers. We want justice. We want to expose their betrayal, to make them understand what they've done, to make them regret it. But here is the wisdom few are willing to hear. When someone betrays you, the last thing you need to do is chase after their conscience. In Buddhist philosophy, everything is impermanent. Trust, like all things, is vulnerable to the winds of karma. People don't always betray you because you were wrong to trust them. Sometimes they betray you because their karma has not yet matured. Their path is still entangled in delusion, greed, or fear. And your only task is to let go with grace. Consider the story of a kind-hearted merchant who took in a traveling partner on his journey through treacherous mountains. They shared meals, stories, and laughter. But halfway through the journey, the partner vanished in the night, along with the merchant's savings. Years passed, and one day, that same merchant, now successful and serene, passed by a prison and saw the face of his old companion behind the bars. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. Just a look, a knowing, a silent echo of karma fulfilling its cycle. In that moment, the merchant smiled, not out of spite, but out of understanding. He had not lost anything. In fact, by letting go, he had been set free from bitterness. His silence was not powerlessness, it was purification. Buddhism teaches us that clinging, even to our pain, creates suffering. When we hold on to betrayal, replay the story in our minds, demand closure, or try to force the other person to acknowledge what they've done, we only prolong our suffering. But when we are silent, not from suppression, but from clarity, we give karma the space to do its quiet work. So the next time someone betrays your trust, do not fall into the trap of needing to explain, accuse, or punish. Say nothing. Withdraw. Heal. And let life take care of what words never could. True justice does not need a loud courtroom. It plays out in the silent unfolding of karma. And the greatest peace you will ever feel is when you no longer need someone to be sorry in order to forgive them. Section 3. When you're disrespected out of jealousy. Jealousy is a quiet poison. It doesn't always scream, but it corrodes. It turns admiration into resentment. It twists another person's success into a reflection of one's own lack. And those consumed by jealousy will often lash out not because of who you are, but because of how you make them feel about themselves. When someone disrespects you out of jealousy, their goal is not truth. It's not fairness. It's to diminish you, to drag you into the emotional pit they themselves are trapped in. And the more you respond, the more you validate their narrative. But what if you didn't respond? What if, instead of trying to win their approval or change their perception, you chose silence? Not as a form of avoidance, but as a declaration of sovereignty. There's a Zen story of a master calligrapher whose art was revered throughout the land. A younger artist, brimming with talent but choked by envy, mocked the master publicly. He called his work childish, overrated, a waste of ink. The townspeople waited for the master to react, to defend his name. But the master simply bowed and said, "Your opinion is yours. Mine is my brush." He returned to his craft. The younger man burned with anger. His insults grew louder, his bitterness more obvious. But the master's silence was louder than any protest. And over time, the community stopped listening to the envious voice and returned to the stillness of the master's presence. This is the wisdom the Buddha pointed to, that not all battles are worth fighting, and not every insult deserves a reply. Jealousy is never really about you. It is about the other person's wound, their unhealed longing, their unmet sense of worth. And trying to fix that by explaining yourself is like trying to fill a broken jar. It only drains your energy. In Buddhist psychology, we are taught about the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. Jealousy is a subtle blend of all three. But you don't heal poison by ingesting more of it through reactive words. Instead, you neutralize it with non-reactivity, with inner detachment, with the fierce gentleness of silence. Let others be loud in their disrespect. Let them craft stories, throw shade, mock, or dismiss. Let them act from the chaos of their own insecurities. Your silence is your mirror. It reflects nothing, so their poison has nowhere to land. In the end, karma speaks where ego cannot. And those who attempt to tear you down will often find themselves undone by the weight of their own bitterness. So when you feel the sting of undeserved disrespect, step back. Don't defend your worth, embody it. Don't match their energy, rise above it. The silence of a person who knows who they are is more deafening than any shout. And the ones who tried to belittle you will one day choke on the echoes of your silence. Section 4. When someone tries to argue with you for no reason. Some people don't want peace, they want friction. They don't enter conversations to understand. They come armed with words like weapons, eager for a reaction. For them, argument is not a means of clarity, it's a performance of ego. But what happens when you don't play your part? What happens when, instead of defending yourself or trying to prove a point, you choose stillness? In Buddhist teachings, there is a concept called right effort. It asks us to use our energy wisely, to invest it where it brings growth, compassion, or insight. Arguing with someone who only seeks conflict is like watering a rock and expecting a tree to grow. It wastes your spirit. There's a simple Zen anecdote that illustrates this perfectly. A traveler, known for his sharp tongue, visited a peaceful monastery. He approached the head monk and began to hurl insults. Your teachings are shallow. Your path is foolish. Your silence is cowardice. The monk, with a gentle smile, replied, "If someone brings a gift to your door and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The traveler, confused, replied, "To the one who brought it." "Exactly," the monk said. "I do not accept your gift." He bowed and returned to sweeping the floor. The traveler stood in silence, unable to continue. This is the essence of Buddhist detachment, the refusal to be pulled into emotional theater that serves no purpose but to inflate ego. When someone tries to argue with you for no reason, ask yourself, what is the purpose of this exchange? If it is not for growth, walk away. In our modern world, especially online, people bait others constantly. They provoke to feel powerful. But if you meet their aggression with silence, you cut the cord. You stop feeding the fire. You return your attention to what matters. This doesn't mean you let yourself be trampled. It means you choose your battles with wisdom, and many of them are not worth fighting. Silence in the face of meaningless conflict is not weakness, it is mastery. It is the ability to value your peace more than your pride. And karma? It doesn't need your voice to function. The person who stirs up arguments will eventually be met with silence from everyone, not just from you. And that silence will be louder than any confrontation. So next time someone tries to pull you into an argument that doesn't nourish your soul, remember, you are under no obligation to attend every verbal storm you're invited to. You don't have to prove anything. Let your calm be your rebuttal. Let your peace be your protest. Let karma be your response. Section 5. When someone tries to bring you down. There's a peculiar truth in life. Those who try to bring others down are often the ones already sinking. Their attacks aren't born from clarity. They're born from chaos, from resentment, from the pain of feeling left behind by someone who dared to grow, to shine, or to step outside the box others tried to keep them in. When someone tries to bring you down, it's rarely about you. It's about the discomfort your light causes in someone still trapped in their shadow. But here's the dangerous temptation: to respond, to fight, to prove them wrong, to step into their arena of bitterness and try to win some moral high ground. But in Buddhist thought, there is no victory in descending into a lower state of being. The real triumph is not in retaliation, it's in restraint. Think of a lotus flower. It rises through murky, stagnant water, untouched by the mud that surrounds it. It doesn't argue with the filth. It simply blooms. Likewise, when others throw dirt at you, in the form of gossip, sabotage, manipulation, or criticism, the most powerful thing you can do is continue blooming, unbothered, rooted in your own path. There is a story of a young musician who was ridiculed by a powerful critic. The critic, bitter at his own obscurity, wrote scathing reviews, mocked the musician's work, and told anyone who would listen that the young man would never amount to anything. But the musician said nothing. He simply kept creating, kept evolving, kept sharing his music with those who resonated with it. Years later, his name was known across the country. His songs played on radios, filled concert halls, comforted broken hearts. And the critic? Forgotten. He had poured his energy into tearing others down, and in doing so, he built nothing of his own. This is what karma reveals. Those who try to dim others eventually burn out themselves. Buddhism teaches us to be aware of intentional speech and action. When someone attempts to harm you, your greatest shield is not retaliation. It's your refusal to descend to their level. It's the silence that refuses to validate their chaos. Because nothing unsettles a person more than realizing they can't affect you. That their attempts to shake your foundation only made your roots stronger. Let their judgment echo into the void. Let their anger dissolve in your silence. Let your success, your peace, your continued rising be the only response they receive. Remember, people don't throw stones at things that are invisible. If they're trying to pull you down, it means you're already above them, in spirit, in mindset, in peace. So walk tall, stay silent. Let karma teach what words never could. Section 6. When your kindness goes unappreciated. Kindness is a sacred offering. It is given freely, not because it is earned, but because it is who we are. And yet, few things feel as disheartening as seeing that kindness ignored, taken for granted, or even exploited. You offer your help, your compassion, your generosity, and instead of gratitude, you receive entitlement. Silence, or worse, betrayal. The natural impulse is to feel hurt, to wonder, why did I even bother? You might feel the urge to confront, to demand acknowledgement, or to pull your kindness away in anger. But true kindness, in Buddhist thought, is not transactional. It's not a contract. It's an act of metta, or loving kindness, which flows not because the other is worthy, but because compassion is the nature of your awakened heart. There's a quiet story that illustrates this. A man once sheltered a traveler from a terrible storm. He fed him, clothed him, even gave him some money for his onward journey. The next morning, the traveler was gone, and so were a few valuable possessions from the house. Friends urged the man to report the theft, to curse the ungrateful guest. But the man simply said, "Perhaps he needed those things more than I did." He never spoke of it again. Months later, that same traveler was caught stealing from another home, this time arrested, exposed, and disgraced. The man who had helped him? He had already moved on. He never asked for repayment, never sought revenge, never spoke ill. His kindness was not tainted by outcome. It was a reflection of his spiritual integrity. Buddhism teaches us that when we expect a return for our goodness, we are planting seeds in infertile soil. The true merit of kindness is not found in applause, but in its ability to remain pure, even when unseen or unappreciated. So when your kindness goes unnoticed, when your good deeds are ignored or exploited, do not react in bitterness. Do not let their lack of awareness poison your heart. Instead, stay silent. Withdraw with grace. Let karma be the teacher. Those who do not value kindness will one day learn its worth, often through its absence. And you? You will have lost nothing. Because in giving, you nourished your spirit. In staying silent, you protected your peace. And in letting go, you allowed the universe to restore balance in ways no confrontation ever could. So keep being kind. Keep giving, not because they deserve it, but because it is who you are. And if your kindness is overlooked, let your silence say, "I give freely, and I expect nothing in return." That, in itself, is spiritual wealth. Section 7. When life feels unfair. There comes a time in every life when things simply don't make sense. You do the right thing, and it backfires. You love deeply, and you're left behind. You give generously, and you're taken for granted. You pray, meditate, serve others, and yet suffering still finds you. In these moments, it's natural to feel that life is unfair, that karma is asleep, that somehow, all your good intentions were wasted. But the Dharma reminds us, what seems unfair now is often a teaching in disguise. There's an old parable in Buddhist tradition about a farmer who sowed his fields with great care. He tended to his crops daily, spoke to them with gentleness, offered water and nourishment, only for a storm to come and destroy everything overnight. His neighbors pitied him. How could life be so cruel to someone so kind? But the farmer said nothing. He returned to his field the next day and began to plant again. Season after season, storm after storm, he continued with quiet resolve. Until one year, the land yielded more than it ever had before, not because the storm stopped, but because the soil had deepened through struggle and his roots had grown stronger with each silent return. This is the power of patience in the face of life's injustices. When we meet unfairness with anger or resistance, we suffer twice, once from the event and again from our emotional turmoil. But when we meet it with silence, the kind that is filled with faith, not resignation, we allow karma to unfold its greater story. The Buddha never promised a life without suffering, but he gave us the tools to suffer skillfully, to meet life's seasons with equanimity, and to trust that behind every loss, every delay, every heartbreak, is a process we cannot yet see. Silence, in these moments, is not the silence of defeat. It is the silence of trust. Trust that everything is impermanent, that storms do not last, that what is taken from you now may return in another form later, deeper, truer, more aligned with your path. Sometimes, karma delays its blessings to build your strength. Sometimes, the universe removes things not to punish you, but to protect you from illusions you didn't yet know were illusions. So when life feels cruel, stay grounded in your practice. Return to your breath. Walk in stillness. And instead of demanding fairness, cultivate understanding. Life is not fair in the way the ego wants, but it is always precise in the way the soul needs. And karma? It doesn't miss a detail. It doesn't move on your timeline, but it never forgets your sincerity. Remain silent, not because you've given up, but because you've given in to something greater than your current understanding. Your peace is a seed. Your patience is its water. And silence is the sunlight that allows it to grow. In a world that screams for instant reactions and loud opinions, silence is a radical act. It is the space between stimulus and response. It is the breath that calms the fire. It is the stillness where karma weaves its quiet threads. Let us remember once more the wisdom we've uncovered. When someone lies about you, don't fight shadows. The truth will rise with time. When you're betrayed, don't chase justice. Your silence is a mirror in which the betrayer will one day see their own reflection. When you're disrespected out of jealousy, remember, their insults say more about their pain than your worth. When someone tries to argue just to feel powerful, your peace is your most powerful response. When someone tries to pull you down, they are already beneath the light you walk in. Stay high. When your kindness is ignored, give anyway, because who you are matters more than how others receive you. And when life feels unfair, do not demand answers. Trust that karma is arranging something your mind cannot yet comprehend. Silence is not surrender. It is not suppression. It is not weakness. It is spiritual maturity. It is the understanding that you are not here to win every argument, respond to every insult, or fix every injustice through force. You are here to live with dignity, with depth, with a kind of groundedness that no rumor, no betrayal, no storm can disturb. The Buddha said, just as a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. That is the fruit of silence. It is the strength of the unshaken. And karma? It is not loud. It does not seek recognition, but it is exact. It moves in its own time. It sees what we cannot, and it returns what is due, not when we want it, but when we are ready to receive it. So the next time you're tempted to speak in anger, to respond in pain, or to seek revenge through words, pause. Return to your center. Let silence speak. Let karma respond. And watch how life unfolds in your favor without you having to force it. Your silence is not the absence of power. It is the very presence of wisdom. Thank you for sharing this space of reflection with us today on Stillness Unfolded. If this message touched your heart, please consider giving this video a like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who may be struggling in silence. We invite you to leave a comment below. Which of these moments of silence spoke most to your soul? Your story matters, and your growth is sacred. Until next time, walk gently, speak mindfully, and trust that karma never forgets.